talk about that later on.
You've got a fan base here, then.
The hype train has left the station.
How old did you say this was?
12 years.
12 years, yeah.
Man, it is good. We just threw all of that on the floor, and this man has no regard for safety. He is not wearing shoes. He could go down while using it.
And John's dead. Wow. That didn't take long at all, but I'm sure he'll come back. Man, happy Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Weekly Whiskey. If you're drinking something good, let us know in the chat. I personally have a dram of something. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, but I'm pretty pumped about tonight's episode. In the meantime, oh, good, John. Good to see you. How are you, my friend?
That was no big deal.
No, it's good. It's great to see you, man. It's another Tuesday. You are getting hit pretty hard with some weather. I'm thankful that it's past here. And I think tomorrow it's actually going to be above zero, which is, I don't think it's been above zero for 2 weeks now. So I'm ready for it.
Damn near tropical.
I know I put on pants the other day, which felt kind of strange, but
Oh, it's very odd that you even have any. I thought you sold them all on eBay by now.
I know. Yeah. Well, once it gets cold, it's time to suit up and maybe put on some pants. But in the meantime, we have some quick Our Bourbon news for you guys. This has been an insane week. The Russell's Reserve has sold out. Smooth Ambler has started shipping. Elijah Craig goes on sale starting tomorrow. So check your inboxes for the Elijah Craig. On top of that, we have added, good God, what have we not added? We've added Whistle Pig 2 and 3 to the list. Knob Creek 2 to the list. High West. A Blue Note, we're going to be talking about some Pinhook. We're going to be talking about some more Russells, some Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit, more New Riff, and good God, I should have written all these down, but there's at least 4 or 5 more. So we're going to top out pretty hard on barrels this year. I've been digging the Russells quite a bit lately. Those are pretty delicious. So big pumps on that.
Hopefully you guys are thirsty because we're going to be bringing it.
Yeah, I think we're on track for 30 barrels this year. So our bourbon is going to take at least 30 barrels this year. So catch up, get on that email list, get your news. But anyways, I'm Jay from Whiskey Raiders. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm joined with John of the Bourbon Finder. If you're looking for news, reviews, head-to-head articles, some really great photography, check him out. If you're looking for reviews, comparisons and aggregates, check out whiskeyraiders.com. But that's enough about us. Why don't we talk about who we're talking with tonight? What do you say?
Let's do it. I'm bringing our guest here. We've got Terry Lizoff from Wheel Horse Whiskey.
Yeah, let's see. Hey, Terry, how's it going?
Hey, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Doing well. Thanks for coming in. We are joined, like John said, by Terry. Let's see. Let's go ahead and start a little bit. So Wheel Horse is practically brand new. I know that around Christmas time is when the bottles started rolling in. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll dive right in on the whiskey.
Yeah, Wheel Horse, we officially launched Wheel Horse December 2019, January 2020 with the rye, and then we launched the bourbon this past fall. So yeah, we're a pretty new brand out there. So I work for a company called Latitude. I head up our spirits division, and you can kind of think of Latitude as an independent bottler, which is a fairly common term when it comes to spirits and whiskey and the history of the whiskey industry over many hundreds of years. And so Wheel Horse was our creation in regards to the idea behind it, what it was going to be. And I partnered with a distillery called Green River. Some people knew it as OZ Tyler. Some people have heard of it as Owensboro Distilling Company. But Green River is the official name that they go by now. It's a distillery name that goes back to the late 1800s. They actually own the 10th oldest distilling permit in Kentucky. So it's a historic distillery that got a reboot, and I was kind of lucky to find them during the reboot stage to partner with them to create Wheel Horse.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, we saw that rebranding go through. I think it was earlier this year, and that's a really historic name. It was really cool to see it kind of come back, because a lot of people are like, I've never heard of OZ Tyler, and you kind of had to explain it, but people were like, oh, like Green River, I know that right away. That's extremely historic.
Yeah, it's a really cool story. And I definitely feel lucky to have found them when I did, because the history of Green River, like I said, it goes back to the late 1800s, and during the middle of the 1900s, it was owned by the Medley family, and they produced whiskeys that you've probably heard of, like Old Medley, Mellow Corn, Ezra Brooks. So they're part of the history of the Kentucky bourbon industry, big time. And then they kind of came upon some rough years, as many in the bourbon industry did during the 90s and the early 2000s, and the distillery shut down and was boarded up for a couple decades, really, and was bought in 2014 by a new group that really restored it brick by brick, and rebuilt this historic distillery from the ground up. And they brought on Ron Call and Jacob Call. Ron Call had been with Beam and Florida Distillers for about 40 years, longtime master distiller, Kentucky guy, and his son Jacob, who kind of took on the family business. And so Jacob Call is the master distiller, and he's been tasked with and has done an amazing job with rebuilding the whiskey program. It's not an uncommon story for some of these other, Kentucky brands that distilleries that we've seen kind of come back up in the recent years. And it's exciting to see with a lot of these distilleries that are coming back online.
That's really cool. It's always cool to see like a nice reboot. And I'm really curious.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you found them at a really good time. What encouraged you to start Wheelhorse? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about. So Latitude is a wine and spirits company. We develop new brands, and we launched our spirits division in 2019, 2018, and I personally have I'm a whiskey geek for a long time. I was in the marketing and advertising agency business for about 15 years, working in and around beer for most of that time. I spent a lot of time with craft beer and craft breweries as the craft beer world was coming up, and I just fell in love with the beer world, and through that fell in love with whiskey. And I started a website in 2010 called Drink Insider, and had an opportunity to write about a lot of whiskeys, taste a lot of whiskeys, and just became a huge whiskey geek. And so when I was given the opportunity to launch a whiskey brand, I approached it from my own perspective, which was, I want a great rye whiskey in the $30 price point that I can sip neat, that's high proof, that's non-chill filtered, full flavored, that ideally is coming from Kentucky, and something that I can just, can be my go-to every day, because I just didn't feel like there was a lot of great rye whiskeys in that price point that every day. And so I went out searching for a partner, and I found Jacob and Green River. And I approached them and I said, "Do you guys have any rye?" And they said, "What are you talking about? We make bourbon." We're a Kentucky bourbon distillery, and we've been doing it for 100-something years. But it turned out they actually had a small amount of rye, and the distillery had never in its history released a rye whiskey. And so I was lucky, because I came in and said, "I want all your rye, and I want to launch a partnership with you guys." And so Wheelhorse Rye, when it came out in December 2019, was the first time that a rye whiskey had ever come out of this historic distillery. And
Wow.
so I kind of feel lucky, because I feel like Wheelhorse really took on a part of the history and the new history that they're making at Green River. But of course, the plan was always to launch a bourbon as well, and we did that in the fall. They're younger whiskeys. They're not they're not like ultra age. Obviously, the distillery only started putting down barrels in 2016. So, both the bourbon and the rye are a blend of whiskeys primarily that are between 3 and 4 years. We have to say minimum of 2 on the back of the label, because that's what's legal, and it does have some like 2.5 to 2 and 10 months on the early side, but it goes up from there.
Oh, very cool.
And I think they're doing a really good job. I think if you guys have tried these whiskeys, we're really proud of them. We're excited by what they bring to the table.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So like lots of brands start all the time, right? And sometimes John and I like talk to each other and we're like, the brand is cool. They have a cool story. But like, what were they thinking? They're releasing an 80 proof this, or it's old and it's low proof and it's filtered, or it's young. And like, hearing you say like, I wanted a rye, I want it to be non-chill filtered, I want it to be, moderately aged and at a good proof. Like that checks all the boxes. And the under 30 part, or the under and around 30 part is actually impressive as well. Yeah, let's start with the rye a little bit. I've drank some, John's drank some. I've got reviews up. I was pretty impressed for the age. Like there's no real sign of youth. Like, that kind of 2, 3, 4 line. Sometimes you get like young malty notes. Sometimes you get, that nice oak. So this is being distilled. Tell me about how it's being aged. Are these aged in full size barrels, small barrels?
Yeah. So the rye is 95% rye, 5% malted barley. They're all aged in 53-gallon new oak barrels. One of the things I really love about Green River is that they still have all of the rick houses on the property that have been there for 50, 60, 70 plus years. They're all open-aged, open, warehouses that they age their barrels in. So Jacob uses number 4 char barrels, so it does, impart a lot of flavor. And of course, you have like, the Kentucky weather that helps to kind of get it where it needs to be. But that was one of the things I found about their younger whiskeys is that they don't have that young flavor. I kind of find it like right when it hits the 2.5 year mark for me, when I was tasting, is where it starts to lose that. And then we blend in stuff that's in the 3 up to 4 year range. And so I think on both of these, you really don't get that green kind of young note that you can get sometimes on younger whiskeys.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of nice brown sugar to it too, which really,
it comes across a lot sweeter than you'd expect for a 95.5.
But it's got some good spice.
It does. As I've been tasting this on people and hearing people's reactions over the last year, one of the things that I've heard a lot is that people who don't typically drink rye like this because it has a little of that bourbon sweetness. And actually on the bourbon side too, I think you get a lot of that rye spice that both of these I find are pretty balanced. And the rye in particular, though, has a really nice sweetness to it that not over the top because it still has a lot of spice and it's still balanced really nicely, but it's a little different.
Yeah, it's just a nice kind of a background. Geez, it's almost like a honey brown sugar kind of mix.
I get a weird
pepper quality too.
What's Honey Bunches of Oats is a cereal that I used to like eat as a kid. That's like kind of coming back to me. Like there's a little bit of nuttiness, like a nice caramel sweetness, like a tiny bit of malt, not in like a young malt way, but like, the whiskey, like the base malt is there. And then a little bit of that kind of spice and granola. It's come together really nicely.
Do you guys have batch 2 or batch 1?
Yes, I have batch 2 here.
2.
Okay.
Is there a big difference between the two?
There's a little bit of a difference. This is it's a small batch product. And I think batch 2 of the rye was probably around 30 barrels. Small batch.
That's actually a small batch. Right.
Not
very really defined.
Definition. But so the rye batch 2 is around 30 barrels. And I work with Jacob on, basically blending the barrels together. And so there's like variation definitely between batch 1 and batch 2. I think batch 3, as we kind of go along, I think the makeup of the batches will start getting older. And so I do think you'll start getting more depth of flavor as we go in.
See that profile shift a little to a darker one.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. I was going to ask if you were planning to keep the ages about the same or if you're planning to see some of them increase over time.
I think the profile for our base level bourbon and rye 101 proof products that are meant to be around $30, I think these will always kind of be in that 3 to 4 year age range. I'd like to eventually get them all there, the blends, because I think there's a really nice flavor profile, and it's I think they deliver at that $30 level at that that age range. But as we start aging barrels longer, we are looking into doing other cool things like some cast finish releases. Maybe we'll do some age statement releases down the road of a 5 or 6 year So it's the distillery is young, Wheelhorse is young, and we're just kind of getting started with what I hope we'll do. And I know you guys do a lot of single barrels, so that's definitely in the future as well, trying to get some single barrel Wheelhorse going.
Cool. I
That'd be
mean,
cool.
yeah, we kind of do a lot of everything. We did our first blend last year. It's kind of been fun to tinker and see what's going on. Shoot, I had a question. I'm really curious. So you said the rick houses, and if you don't know the answer to this, it's totally cool. You said the rick house is laid empty for like, several decades. Is there like, can you just start stuffing barrels back into a warehouse? Did you guys have to like extensively investigate and make sure they were still ready to hold barrels again?
When every time I've talked to Jacob about how they rebuilt this, he likes to use the phrase brick by brick, and
okay.
And so I really think that, I think that the rick houses were in decent shape, but I know the distillery was in rough shape, and it took them a lot of energy, time, money to rebuild this into its glory. But I actually do. I've been to the distillery several times, and when I look at the rick houses and when I walk in the rick houses, to me they feel like they've been there for 70 years.
Okay,
and that they've they probably had to do some structural, take a structural look at them before they started stacking barrels again.
That's what I was wondering, because like sometimes when I'm in Kentucky and I look up at like a brand new rick house, I'm still kind of like that's a lot of weight. Like I'm a little bit unsure, and I'm like, but it's brand new, so I'm sure it's fine. And I wonder, like walking into a 7-year-old warehouse, if you're kind of like,
I'm sure they brought in a structural engineer before, putting however many thousands and thousands of barrels in there.
That's good. And it's kind of cool. John and I get to talk to a lot of distilleries, but we don't get to talk to many who are at the beginning of their trajectory. It's kind of cool to see you guys are starting the beginning of your trajectory, on a long timeline of an existing place. But, it's not often that we get to talk to places that have their first 2 products and are looking for the entire market to kind of see where they go next. So it's really cool to hear that aspect of things.
Yeah, and Green River too. I know that they're planning on putting out their own releases in the near future, which will be different than the Wheelhorse stuff, because I, dictate certain things with Jacob about how we do these batches and how we do these whiskeys, like the 101 proof, the non-chill filtered, the profile that we're going for with the blends. So they'll probably, I'm really excited about what Green River's future is. When you look at some of this new generation of Kentucky distilleries that have come online, there's a lot to be excited about there. You guys mentioned a few of them in the barrel selections when you got on this evening, like New Riff and Peerless, and a bunch of those guys that are doing some cool stuff too.
Yeah, it's fun. We'll have to chat when you guys launch, if you launch a barrel program, but it's fun to kind of split that whole program 50-50, like legacy distillers, macro distillers, but like New Riff is always fun to go and see what they've been up to. Yep. There's some like the folks over at Penelope who are just like blending anything and everything in like the coolest way. It's fun to see how much innovation and just like, the industry at this point, it seems kind of open. Like if you have an idea and you have funding and like someone believes in that idea, like the brand is ready to go, and it's so much fun to get to interact with these people. And a lot of the conversations start with like, I had an idea and I thought it was kind of crazy, but then I found 5 or 6 people who believed in it, and like, here we are. And that's, I think, probably the most fun of this, at least for me. I don't know about you, John, but there's a lot of crazy going on in bourbon, and it's really cool to see. And all these like old revivals, and I was really surprised when I got the sounds like, wait, OZ Tyler, like they've been around for a million years, and this is a whole new brand starting out of there, and then the rebrand, like that's a really cool aspect. Yeah,
OZ Tyler, I think, was really just kind of like when they relaunched the distillery, they called it OZ Tyler in 2014, and the whole time they were trying to get back the rights to use the Green River name. And they did some stuff early on with OZ Tyler that they're trying to separate themselves from. They were doing some like fast aging technique stuff, which
things that didn't quite take off.
Yeah, I personally had zero. I tasted some of the stuff that they were doing with that when I first went there, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But the exciting thing is that they've kind of moved away from that, and they're really focused on doing things the right way and aging properly in 53 gallon, new American oak barrels, and And so, it was good that they kind of moved away from the OZ Tyler name and kind of started fresh with the Green River name, which goes back to the 1800s anyway. So that's the
Go
kind
back
of
to the deep
story.
roots.
Yeah.
It's good to see that too, because when admittedly I was, Aaron had told us, hey, it's coming out OZ Tyler, and I was like, oh no, is this Terrapure? Like I need to know right this second.
No.
Yeah, that was my first message to Jay. Actually, this showed up, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, I just got some whiskey in the mail that I'm a little bit skeptical about here." And he's like, "No, it's not what you think." And I was just like, "Okay."
I think they finally come around to the idea that at least the American whiskey consumer doesn't want things made the fast way. And I know there's some other brands out there like Cleveland who have tried to make a business out of this, and I've personally never taken any interest in that. But the majority of what they're doing now is focused on the traditional approach. All of the whiskeys that they're making at this point, all of the Wheelhorse whiskeys are sour mash whiskeys. They're very traditionally made and aged and all that good stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's kind of like, there's no reason to shortcut aging. Like this is young whiskey and it's performing really well. Like we don't mind young whiskey. Taking those shortcuts, I think, just aren't worth it when.
I mean, that's the fastest way to end up, screwing with your end product and then getting somebody to buy one bottle and never coming back again. So
exactly. Well, let's go ahead and pivot a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit about the bourbon as well, which I have here.
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk bourbon.
So you mentioned you started with the rye and like 9 months ish later, you released the bourbon. What was the thought? Like, I know you mentioned you had pretty strong considerations for what you wanted to see out of the rye. Did you feel the same way about your bourbon?
Well, I definitely wanted a high rye bourbon. I, as a lover of rye, I like that rye profile, and I wanted that to be a part of the bourbon. And so this is 70% corn, 21% rye. The rest is malted barley. So it does have a nice rye content. You definitely get that rye spice in this.
Yep.
And the other kind of specs are, if you want to call it that, are about the same as the rye. They're both 101 proof, and I chose that proof point because it's kind of where I felt like this whiskey showed the best, kept the most amount of flavor, and you don't have to water it down at that point. I like drinking these neat, and I love that proof point that it's got enough heat in it. But you could also put it over ice. You could also mix it in a cocktail, and it's not going to water it down too much. So it was kind of a personal preference. I just don't. I like my bourbon at a little higher proof, so you can do what you want with it.
I mean, 100 to 108 is really kind of the sweet spot for me usually. I mean, especially if you have something where the price point is right, it's versatile. You could use it in a cocktail if you wanted to. You're not going to feel bad about throwing something crazy expensive into a cocktail and kind of losing it. And at the same time, you're not going to be needing to dilute it or anything. I think this definitely checks the right boxes for that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like, a lot of places, it's kind of one of the, like, there's always that old adage where it's like, here's 3 things you really want. Now pick 2 of them because life is tough, and suck it and stuff like that. But, and a lot of people talk about the craft tax, like, okay, it's good. The proof is right. It's a little young. Oh, but it's $70, and that's where like the whole house falls down and you're like, oh, craft tax, like, damn. But I mean, 101 proof, moderately aged and $30, like that's coming for, as far as I can tell, like, Wild Turkey 101 is almost $30 here anyways. It's extremely on parity with those, which is really exciting to see, because even Wisconsin's craft distilleries like hit 3 of those 4 boxes, and then our 3-year 100 proof bourbon is $71. And you're just like, oh, like I can't bring myself to spend it. It's too much, but it's $30.
That was part of our goal. Is to bring a great, whiskey, bourbon, rye to market that was higher proof, that wasn't chill filtered, that was made the right way, that was made in Kentucky by a great distillery for an everyday price point. That was the goal. And I feel good that we did it, because there are others out there that are very similar. I mean, listen, Peerless is doing some great stuff, but if you compare the history of the distilleries, how they're making the whiskeys, the proof point, the age statement, they're at like $100.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, they've made a significant drop and it's still like 85. Like I've not seen a Peerless under $85. And that's, no knock on that. Like
I'm not knocking them. I like their whiskey a lot.
Their bottle is incredibly, I won't say fancy, but like, I know the bottle is a big cost, but yeah, I mean, that's double and then some. That's a very significant difference. It's not $5.
Yeah, there's room on the shelf for both, but I mean, a lot can be said for having a product that checks the boxes, still tastes good, and is easily affordable.
And this is nice. You're right. This has more spice and a good. I'm not like it's not like crazy peppery, but like it has a really nice clove component. Like
it
has a bit of oak, which I didn't expect, which is nice. Brown sugar, that kind of brown butter praline. It's got a lot going on. And again, a lack of that like youthy must, like kind of cardboard flavor.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah. I'm excited. The bourbon is probably going to be the first single barrel program we're going to do because we have access to more aged bourbon than we do rye. There's just not a lot of rye right now to go around. But so I think our hope is that we're going to launch a single barrel bourbon program later this year, and obviously we'd be releasing those at barrel proof, so it'd be close to 120 proof, 118-ish, and hopefully all of the barrels that we would release would be in the 3 to 4 year range. So I think as you start getting into some of those, you'll get to kind of start seeing how these whiskeys are developing a little bit more and what they taste like at their full proof, and they're really good, and I love what they're doing there.
Good. I'm pumped. I would love to try one of these at barrel proof in 4 years. Can you say what the entry proof is? Do you guys disclose
you beat
that?
Me to it. I was going to roll it back in my head. I'm like, okay, so cask strength is about 120.
And if you can't disclose that, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll let Jacob, speak to that if he wants to at some point. But I try to be as transparent as possible. I'm actually, I'm not 100%. I don't want to say a number and be off, but
sure.
I do know that we take them out at around between 116 and 118, give or take. But
that's I'm trying to think of the right way. I mean, barrel proof 4 years, as long as the price is right. Like that sounds like a knockout barrel program. How big? I know we talked about how big the batch was for the rye batches. Can you say how big in terms of barrels the bourbon batches are? Are they about the same? Are they a little bit bigger?
Bourbon was a little bit bigger. The batch one bourbon, I think it was around 50 barrels.
Oh, okay.
And then I think this fall, we're trying to basically go spring fall bottlings. And so the spring bottlings will be smaller. I think the rye again is going to be in that 30 barrel, and that's been selling out pretty quickly. We don't have any more in our warehouse.
Oh wow!
There's still some out at stores for sure, but the rye's been selling out pretty quickly. The bourbon you can still get, but it will be out by the time we release the next batch in May. The next bourbon batch will probably be around the same 50, but then we should do a bigger one. I'm hoping this fall. It's not. I mean, we're not talking about large batches, no matter what. I mean, we're going to be in the 50 to probably 100 barrel range.
That's not nothing though. I mean, that's a pretty healthy batch.
Yeah. So the bourbon will be There's definitely going to be more of the bourbon than the rye.
I like it.
So
yeah. Cool. Well,
I get a nice fragrant tobacco thing going on with the bourbon. It's nice.
Yeah. And that comes like it has more oak than I'd expect, and like in a well-developed way, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't taste like an old whiskey, but it also doesn't taste like that young, thin, grainy green. I mean,
and I typically
it's doing pretty well for itself.
Older expressions for me to start to get like kind of that nice like must, that tobacco, that tannin, like it's well developed.
Yeah, I like the texture of these whiskeys. There is that tannin to it, and there's the rye spice and all those components that come together and give it a really nice texture.
Yeah, they have really good mouthfeel. And leading into that, so I don't know if you're a cocktail guy. Like I occasionally make cocktails based on what time. Yeah. Do you have a favorite cocktail for each release? And then we'll kind of close up.
I am a cocktail guy. I do like cocktails, and I use Wheelhorse in cocktails often. what I tend to do with sweet vermouth cocktails like Manhattan, for instance, is if I'm using the rye, is I'll dial back the sweet vermouth a little bit, because I do think that the Wheelhorse rye has a little bit more natural sweetness to it, and so dialing back the sweet vermouth, I think, is a good call. And on the bourbon old fashioned, again, you can dial back the sugar a little bit too, the sugar element. But I make all kinds of cocktails with these, and I think they're great. I think that's what I love about these, is that they're great in cocktails, they're great neat, great over ice, and it's not gonna bust your wallet.
I love it. I mean, if there's one thing the bourbon drinkers don't need anymore of, it's busted wallets. Because
that's what that was part of the catalyst. It was like I was kind of as a whiskey consumer, as somebody who's been buying whiskeys for 12 years, I just kind of watched as the shelves got more expensive, as more and more whiskeys got hard to get, and the price points just go up and up and up, and it's just frustrating, from the perspective of somebody who loves whiskey, seeing the price points of bourbon especially just go up and up. And
fucking bookers. Used to buy it at like $55, and now Jesus,
still bitter about that one.
I'll mention just a side project we just launched called Hunt and Gather.
We're familiar with that.
Okay, cool. So we just launched that, the first lot of that. That was all about finding kind of lost batches or lost barrels of old stuff. And our first one was a 15-year Kentucky whiskey, and we put that out at like $95, which was
one of the few that came in crazy with a reasonable price.
That undercut a lot
of the 15-year stock.
The other 15 years.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're trying to do. And we've got the next lot that we're working on. We're hoping for Hunt Gather will be out in probably April.
Okay.
It's not going to be Kentucky bourbon, but that was not the goal of Hunt Gather, was not to just release Kentucky bourbon. It was about showcasing great spirits that have ultra aging from around the world.
Awesome. Cool. Well, it sounds like we will have to have a follow-up episode about Hunt and Gather, because that has been
they're very separate brands, Wheelhorse and Hunt and Gather, but it's from the same company, from Latitude.
Okay, cool. Well, it has been awesome to have you tonight. I really enjoyed the rye and the bourbon.
Cool.
Go ahead and tell us, where can people find you? Where can they find Wheelhorse? And then we'll close this shop up.
Yeah, I mean, wheelhorsewhiskey.com. We have a store finder. We also sell the whiskey online. If you can't find it, it is distributed probably in only about 16 states right now. So there's definitely a lot of states that don't have Wheelhorse, but that's changing. That's changing quickly. We hope by throughout this year, the distribution for Wheelhorse will be a lot broader. But if you can't find it locally, you can always go on wheelhorsewhiskey.com and buy it online.
Awesome.
So thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks for joining us as well. I'm glad we got to talk about what you guys were drinking and have another great guest. If you're looking for more from John, you can find him at thebourbonfinder.com. Word on the street is that he has some crazy pours coming up, so check out his reviews and Heads to Heads. And I am Jay from Whiskey Raiders, so if you guys are looking for reviews, we've got some new stuff coming out as well. We are the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey, so go and find up. The reviews for both the bourbon and rye are online right now. And Terry, it's been a pleasure. So thanks for joining us.
Likewise.
Everyone stay healthy. Hope your power stays on if you're in a state with storms, which I think like 40 states are right now. So drink some whiskey and cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.